All right. So this is Mr. Chavez, and we read The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was this is a story about somebody exacting revenge on somebody else, and we actually get to go into the mind of that person as they are doing this act of revenge. So it's very interesting. And basically, the way that it starts out is first of all, the actual title, the cask of Amontillado. Okay, a cask is a big wine barrels that holds all the wine, and Amontillado is a form of sherry. It's actually a form of very expensive wine, and it's compared to sherry. A lot of times, it's confused with sherry. So anyway, it starts out. Our narrator's name is Montresor, and he is exacting revenge on his a rival of his named Fortunato. So it says right here, it says, the thousand injuries I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. Okay? And that's basically his way of saying, you know what? Me and this guy, we have some history, and this guy has gotten the better of me many times, but um, he basically has insulted me, and now I have to take revenge. There's just no way I can get through it. And one of the things that I said to class was, imagine for a second that I'm challenging you to, like, we're going to play tennis, and we play tennis, 50 times, and 49 times out of those 50 you beat me, and I pretty much know that you're the best, and you always tell me, hey, you stink at tennis. Okay, well, I get that, but now the 50th time that you beat me, you're like, hey, you know what, you stink at tennis, and you are stupid, and your wife is stupid. And so at that point now it's insulting. And so I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. So the thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. And then he says this, he says, you will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. So I always kind of look at this and I compare it to what Sir Francis Bacon was talking about. I'm not even going to warn this guy. Sir Francis Bacon said, you know what? There's a virtue in warning somebody that you are going to exact revenge on them because maybe they'll apologize and that'll probably feel better than the actual act of the revenge. So at this point, he's just like, you know what? I'm not interested in him repenting. I'm not even going to tell this guy that I'm going to do this. At length, I would be revenged. This was the point definitely settled, but the very definitives with which I was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. So that is his way of saying, I am going to punish this person and I'm going to make sure that I don't suffer any consequences from this. So then he goes on to say, it is equally unaddressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as much of to him who was done the wrong. So this is his way of basically saying, you know what? Uh, Not only am I going to enact revenge on or exact revenge on this person, but this person is going to know. So then we're going to go on to this paragraph here, the third paragraph. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on connoisseurship in wine. Now, this right here is pretty much the narrator's way of saying, you know what? I know this guy's weakness, and I have a way of using that weakness to get him where I need him to go. He loves to be a connoisseur in wine. He's respected in that area. So that's the area that I'm going to go to. I'm going to lure him with the temptation of something having to do with wine. So then he goes down and he says, it was about dusk one evening, the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. And he actually calls him a friend, which I think is very sarcastic. But I love this because he's basically saying right here, during the madness of the carnival season. So it's a loud time. It's kind of, he refers it to as a mad time. It's loud. There's a lot of people around. It was at dusk, so it's getting dark. And you know what? This is when I think I'm going to exact my revenge. He accosted me with an excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. So this guy's drunk, and not only is he drunk, but he's a friendly drunk. And he says the man wore motley. He had on tight-fitting party-striped dress, with his head surmounted by a comical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I never should have done wringing his hand. He basically says, you know what, this guy is dressed like a fool. He's dressed kind of like a court jester. He's got on this tight fitting party striped dress and he's got bells on his hat and he just looks like an idiot. But when I saw him, I was so pleased to see him that I should never have done wringing his hand. Now, I really want to point out the sinister nature of this particular line right here. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. That is something you say about somebody that you like, about somebody that you haven't seen in a while, and somebody that you appreciate. This is a person he hates. He wants to exact revenge on this person. And he's so pleased to see him. Like, that is how driven this guy is to do his revenge, is that when he sees the person that he's going to go after, he's pleased to see him and he shakes his hand so much that he just can't even stop. So he says to him right here, he says, I said to him, my dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. Okay, so this is obviously some sort of sarcastic remark, but Fortunato's drunk, so what would he know? But I have received a pipe of what passes as Amontillado, and I have my doubts. So right away, he sets the trap. Hey, wine connoisseur man, I have this Amontillado, this very rare, expensive, often counterfeited wine, and I kind of have my doubts of whether or not it's real. And so Fortunato says, how, said he, Amontillado, a pipe? Impossible. And in the middle of the carnival? So he's even like, you have Amontillado? Are you serious? And then he goes on to say, I have my doubts, and I was silly enough to pay full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. So here he decides to endear himself to Amontillado by uh, speaking of his reputation and complimenting his reputation and letting him know, you know what? I bought this Amontillado. I was kind of forced to buy it quickly. I was looking for you because I really needed your help, but you weren't anywhere to be found. And, at this point, Fortunato is so excited. He's like, Amontillado? And he's like, yeah, but I have my doubts. I don't know if it's real. And then he's like, Amontillado. And he says, and I must satisfy them. So, it's like this Fortunato, he's so drunk, he just keeps yelling out Amontillado while this guy's like trying to say, look, I have my doubts and I need to know whether or not I have true Amontillado. And then he says, as you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucrece. If one of you has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucrece cannot tell Amontillado from Sherry. And so at this point, this is where the Montresor says, you know what, since you're busy, I'm going to go find Lucrece, and he can probably tell me if this is true, Amontillado or Sherry. And Lucrece, or excuse me, Fortunato throws shade at Lucrece. Apparently, he knows Lucrece, and he's like, dude, he can't tell Amontillado from Sherry. And then he says, and yet some fools will have it taste as much as your own. Come, let us go. Now, this is Fortunato speaking. Fortunato takes the bait and then he becomes the one who insists on going where Montresor wants to take him. So he's like, come, let us go. Where? To your vaults. My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I have perceived that you have an engagement. And then he goes into Lucrece again. And this is basically his way of saying, no, that's okay. You don't have to do this. I'm not going to take advantage of you. I can see that you have somewhere to go. And then he mentions Lucrece, which obviously is something that Fortunato can't walk away from. It's kind of like when you know that you want to get under somebody's skin and you mention somebody that they don't like, and you kind of show faith in that person, they kind of get upset. And Fortunato says, I have no engagements. Come. And then he says, my friend, no, it is not an engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp, and they are encrusted with niter. So at this point, uh, Montresor tells Fortunato, he says, you know what? It's not the engagement that I'm worried about, but you seem to be sick. You don't seem to be feeling very good. You seem to be ill. And I don't want to take advantage of that. And not only that, but there's also a bunch of niter, and, I just don't want you suffering from that. And then at this point, he mentions that there were no attendants at home. He basically says in this paragraph, he says, "You know what? I have no attendants at my house, and I told them that you know what they better stay at my house or else I'll know about it." His attendants left.